Greetings from Israel. I'll start with 3 signs that can't be ignored. Iran is burning from within, the United States is flexing its muscles in the region, and in Syria. Not only is a stage coming to an end, but the situation is also becoming more and more complex. With the huge risk that Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, the infamous terrorist group, could rise again with great strength, let's get right into it, because what's happening in the region are pieces that together paint a rather delicate scenario. Let's start with Iran, because that's where the heart of many of the tensions we're experiencing lies, here in the Persian country. The chief of police, Ahmad Rasaradan, came out with a very clear ultimatum. He gave the protesters, whom he calls misguided, 3 days to turn themselves in. And the message comes with incentives. If they turn themselves in, they will receive lighter sentences. Translated into plain language, either they surrender or what's coming for them will be much worse. And all of this is happening in a context where the numbers being circulated are inaccurate. There's no way to confirm an exact figure. There are reports that talk about 5,000 people who have lost their lives throughout the uprisings. Within Iran, there are reports of 8,000, some even say 10,000. And other sources report figures of 20,000 people dead. All of them during the protests and clashes, especially in the Kurdish areas in the northeast. Later, I'll clearly explain everything about the Kurds so you can understand, since it might not be clear from your perspective what Kurds and non-Kurds are. I'll explain that to you. Just be patient with me. At the same time, the regime's judicial system is also drawing hard lines. The chief prosecutor, Ali Saleh, came out to reject Trump's statements about supposed canceled executions and called them unfounded nonsense. And he finished by saying that the judicial response to cases related to the protests will be decisive, deterrent, and swift. In other words, speed and a heavy hand, a firm hand. Now there's an even more sensitive point, because now it's not just about speed and repression. In classic terms, complaints and evidence of the use of chemical substances against protesters are increasing. Videos have been seen that finally managed to get out of the information blackout in Iran, the internet blackout, where you can see Iranian security forces using equipment and masks that you would normally associate with hazardous materials, meaning they're not using them just to spray water. And in addition, a first-person account appeared that circulated on social media, where persistent symptoms are described. Days later, things like high blood pressure, elevated heart rate, stomach pain, headaches, and dizziness. There was also a report from a doctor circulating, saying that it wasn't normal tear gas, but unauthorized substances that alter the body. If that is confirmed on a larger scale, it would be a very serious escalation in the level of repression currently being seen in Iran by the regime's forces. Meanwhile, another battle is underway on the streets, the digital war. And pay close attention, because Iran was the victim of a cyberattack that was almost unprecedented, directly hitting one of the regime's central nerves, its propaganda. Was there an intrusion in the state broadcast? Just so you get an idea. Very similar to what happened with Maduro back in the day, when he was still in Venezuela. He literally took over television and held those long conferences, those long talks, and all of television just became state television. Well, in Iran, exactly the same thing happens. What happened is that there was a digital intervention. A hack linked to the Iranian body satellite was reported, and it affected more than 10 Israeli television channels. Instead of religious programs and official news from the regime, for a few minutes, content that is completely forbidden by the system appeared. Photos of street protests, shouts of death to the dictator Khamenei, and direct messages to soldiers and security forces of the same regime, basically telling them, "You're going to shoot your own brother, join the people, put down your weapons." Slogans like "the national revolution of the Iranians" also appeared, along with calls to continue the fight because freedom is near. The point isn't just the content, it's the humiliation for the regime. Normally, security systems block these attempts from external signals within seconds. But what happened this time was a very long lapse of several whole minutes. Something that's totally unusual. And here's where it gets interesting. This doesn't happen in a vacuum, because right while Iran is trying to put out the internal fire that's suffocating it, the United States is repositioning military assets in a way that's too visible for us to ignore. On the naval front, the aircraft carrier, the United States ship Abraham Lincoln, and its strike group are currently passing through the Strait of Malacca. Are they really already heading out with the expectation of entering the United States Central Command's area of operations? Here in the region, within a range of about 5 to 7 days. The aircraft carrier's journey to the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean is a sign of presence and capability. It's not the same to have a ship hidden and far from the Iranian coast as it is to have an aircraft carrier with its entire strike group, which will finally be ready to park right in front of Iran. In the air domain, it was reported today that 12 F-15s took off from the United States military base in the United Kingdom to a base in Jordan. In the past week, the United States reportedly sent 18 F-15Es to the region. This is important for a simple reason. From Jordan, those planes are within operational range not only of Iran, but also of Syria and Iraq. In other words, it's not just a move to look good on the map. It's a real positioning that's happening right now. In addition, there is talk of transport missions speeding up the transfer of assets to the Middle East, which have been happening throughout the past week, including CK-135R tanks from the United Kingdom, and a coordinated movement dynamic that seems designed for deterrence, but at the same time maintains operational flexibility. It's like saying, here I am and I'm ready, but I'm still not going to tell you which button is going to be pressed. All of this obviously keeps us all in suspense. And remember, as I said in the previous video, no one knows when, how, or where it's going to happen. Only the direct actors know that. It's not only the United States taking action. There have also been deployments observed from British, French, and German allies with Eurofighters in Akrotiri, Cyprus, and also at a base in Jordan. In other words, the board is filling up. Now, the big question everyone is asking is, will this end in an attack on Iran, or is it just pure pressure? Like I said, we're all spectators here, and at least I'm not going to judge the prophet. According to what has been leaked by intelligence sources and shared in American media, the United States negotiations with Iran are not going well at all. Diplomacy continues, of course, but in the meantime, Plan B is being prepared, which is the plan that nobody wants to mention out loud. Or, well, we don't know if maybe that's actually Plan A and diplomacy would be Plan B. And what has been said is that Trump would have another window to try attacks in the next 2 to 3 weeks when the assets are fully positioned in the region. What does this mean? That if this moves to an attack scenario, it wouldn't be tomorrow morning? Just on a whim like that? It would be a calculated window where everything is already in place. Aircraft carriers, defenses, logistics, planes, and the ability to respond to a possible retaliation not only from Iran, but from all its proxies in the region. And watch out. With this from Israel, it's also perceived that the United States is still desperate to attack in the coming days, and that its military buildup could reach a peak in about a week. In addition, it's being said that Central Command was ordered to prepare for major operational support 24/7 over the next month, precisely because of tensions related to Iran. That sounds like a sustained operation, doesn't it? Not just something for 24 hours. There have also been reports circulating, quoting United States officials speaking to Israeli media, saying that the attack will happen and the United States is preparing for action, and that Trump even reportedly told Netanyahu that Israel must be prepared to pay the price of an Iranian response. Now then, this brings us directly to Israel. Why, in this kind of scenario, is Israel not just another spectator? Israel is part of the equation, whether you want it or not. Today, 3 F-35I planes landed at the Nevatim base. Let's shift our focus from Iran to China. I want to share some news that honestly is quite strange, but at the same time compromising. And it has to do with the Minister of Defense here. Israel suspended the use of Chinese electric vehicles, which are becoming really super famous, especially build your dreams due to serious cybersecurity concerns. And here we're not talking about whether I like China or not. We're talking about sensors, cameras, microphones, communication systems, and real-time data collection, audio, video, geolocation, even biometric information. And in a country like Israel, where any movement of an official, a base, a meeting, or a route can be sensitive information, the idea that a car could operate with a mobile data platform is a risk that nobody here wants to take. And this might sound exaggerated to some people, but if you think about it, it's because they don't really understand it deep down. Today, a modern car, like the ones that are coming from China, isn't just a car. It's a computer on wheels. And where there's a computer, there's vulnerability. And where there's vulnerability, there's a possibility of espionage. And in this, Israel is very experienced. All right, I'll take this moment to give you a few seconds to hit the subscribe button, which is also free. And hit the bell to get notified when I upload a new report. Memberships are also active and grant access to the group. From Europe, or from Europe, or from Europe, or from or. Very well. Now let's move to Syria, where there's a high risk that things could get out of control with everything that's happening there, which also keeps Israel on constant alert, since we've shared a border with this country for years. Syria was practically split, with the central government in Damascus on one side, and on the other side, a large strip in the northeast under Kurdish control, which borders directly with Turkey, mainly through what is known as the Syrian Democratic Forces. The Syrian Democratic Forces, which had support from the United States, while fighting the infamous terrorist group Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. That de facto autonomy lasted for about a decade and maintained a key reality: territorial control, their own forces, and, above all, strategic areas with many resources. Well, what seems to be happening is that this stage is coming to an end at an incredible speed. But now, in order for me to continue, and so that you can understand all this drama, let me explain in a very simple way who the Kurds are, because they are the main characters here in this whole story, so that you are also situated in time and space. Also, because if you don't understand that, then everything I'm going to tell you will sound like Chinese or Syrian or whatever you want, but you won't understand it. They'll just be odd names. The Kurds are a large people from the Middle East with their own identity and culture, and they mainly live spread across 4 countries: Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. In other words, they don't have their own country, something like a Kurdistan, but instead they're spread out within the borders of all these 4 countries. That's why, in many places and around the world, everywhere and everywhere and everywhere and everywhere in the world, all over the world and everywhere, and Enrico. Do you need to know and understand who the walls are? And with this context, clear or done, Aramuk advanced. There was the SLF, that is, the Syrian Democratic Forces here. Another important fact: Syrian Democratic Forces stands for these Syrian Democratic Forces, which are an alliance of armed groups that operate mainly in northeastern Syria, and they are mostly made up of Kurdish fighters, whom you now know who they are, although it must be said, they also include Arabs and other minorities. And they emerged, listen carefully, with the backing of the United States in order to fight against the terrorist group Islamic State of Iraq and Syria at the time. In other words, they are forces that are present in 4 countries. They are heavily armed. It's practically an entire army, but it's not the army of those 4 countries. So, what's happening right now in Syria is that the forces of the current Syrian government, the governmental forces. The forces of the country under the leadership of al are taking control of very sensitive points in the northeast of the country. In the northeast of Syria, which is the area where the Kurds lived for many decades, who at one point were a symbol of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Regarding this, the Syrian Ministry of Defense even published maps declaring total control over these areas. On the ground, scenes have been seen that show the kind of transition that is taking place. Syrian government forces crossing the Euphrates with improvised means, preparing for bigger clashes. At the same time, it was also reported that the commander of the Kurdish forces, Maslum Abdi, arrived in Damascus to discuss the final details of a much-needed agreement. And that obviously sounds like negotiation, but the reality is that the situation is too tense and very fragile. Just the day before yesterday, those negotiations made progress and an agreement was reached, a ceasefire that lasted only a few hours. Negotiations are being attempted, and there are many countries trying to support and make these negotiations happen because it's an issue that obviously concerns the entire region. The prisons where the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria terrorists are being held, which are currently located in those Kurdish areas. Today, clashes broke out near facilities holding thousands of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria linked detainees. The Syrian Democratic Forces, that is, the Kurdish forces, warned that if control is lost during this transition, the result could be a resurgence of terrorism. On the Syrian government side, they denied attacking prisons and said that their goal is precisely to secure the areas. But amid the chaos, there was also talk of escapes and detainees getting away. If that is confirmed on a larger scale, it's a time bomb, not only for Syria, but for all the countries bordering this nation. And not just because of the prisons. There's also the Al-Hol camp, which has always been a huge problem because of the concentration of people directly or indirectly linked to Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. There are reports of movements and escapes amid the chaos, and that's in an unstable area. That's exactly the kind of thing that ends up happening later. An option of going towards terrorist terror. Avon. Intense is terrorist terrorism, you die. Turkey has always seen the Kurdish forces as a threat. So this rearrangement is strategically convenient for Erdogan, who is simply using the facade of being able to prevent any situation with Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. It's really to get the famous Kurds out of the way. And the truth is, Erdogan never does anything without a plan. And a key fact that changes the game is that the Syrian government took control of very important energy fields, like Omar and Conoco. This isn't just about territory, it's about money, leverage, and power. The reflection is very simple when a territory changes hands so quickly. The danger isn't just about who controls it today, but also the void that emerges in the process. And the void in this region is sometimes filled by a state, or sometimes it could be filled by a terrorist group like Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And this takes us directly to Iraq, where Iraqi forces are reinforcing their border with Syria precisely because of that fear. The chaos in northeastern Syria could lead to Islamic State of Iraq and Syria operatives being released, resulting in infiltration and attacks. The deputy chief of operations of Iraq said that the borders are secured and that they are ready to stop any attempt or crossing by terrorist groups. And it's not paranoia. Iraq knows it. They've already experienced what happens when Islamic State of Iraq and Syria takes advantage of a moment of chaos in Syria, regroups, crosses over, and strikes again. And I'm talking about the massacres that this group, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, carried out in Iraq at the time. Well, as you can see, the situation here is not easy at all. That's how the region is today. We will closely monitor each situation's development, especially United States actions, with the threat of an attack on Iran not only lingering, but also growing stronger. And it seems like it's really coming. So don't leave without giving us a like, subscribe, see you, music.